Good morning. It is 6:47 and she just started barking. She was not barking at all before that. Linda, please don't. Thank you. Oh my god. It stresses me out when she does that. Okay. Sorry, where was I? Good morning. It's 6:47 a.m. on Friday, April 29th, 2016. Friday! I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. So today I think I'm going to talk a little bit about Alexander Hamilton. Not specifically the guy, but rather the book by Ron Chernow. It's a biography. I started to say autobiography, but that would not be correct. But the biography of Alexander Hamilton that was largely the initial source and inspiration for the musical, meaning the creators of the musical, Lin-Manuel Miranda, read the book, and that was what inspired him to say, hey, we need to make a musical about this guy. And I believe I've spoken about loving the musical before, but if I have not, or if you've not seen one of those videos, love the musical. It's so good. I've not seen it produced, alas, but as just the cast recording, the album, I love it so much. It is so good. I just think, okay, this video is not about that, but I love it. Lots of people love it. I'm not the only one. Anyway, reading the book, I got the audiobook from Audible, and it's a long one because it's like 36 hours for the I wanted to say the unedited version, but I knew unabridged. That's the word. So the unabridged version is that long. So it must be a big doorstop of a book, I'm sure. So I'm not finished with it yet. I'm up through maybe halfway through his time during the Revolutionary War. But what's been fascinating is listening to it while keeping in mind the musical and just basically making comparisons and thinking about the process of adapting the real history to the way that it's told in the musical. And it makes perfect sense that what you would be doing in the musical is simplifying things, condensing things, and reorganizing just a little bit to try to produce an effective, coherent narrative in the musical, when what you're really doing is you're telling the story of this really complicated, fascinating historical figure. His life was really complicated, and so trying to tell that in a condensed way for a musical, it's a fascinating process. What do you keep? What do you not keep? What do you change? And at least so far, the changes are pretty interesting. Like they're what you would think, but it's just interesting kind of watching the process. Like, so for example, John Laurens and Lafayette is his good buddies. So in the musical, he meets Aaron Burr first, and then subsequently meets as a trio John Laurens, Hercules Mulligan, and Marquis de Lafayette. Whereas in the history, he meets Hercules Mulligan pretty early on upon coming to New York. There's discussion that he probably knew Aaron Burr because they traveled in the same circles, but they weren't good buddies exactly, or at least there's no historical record of them being at that time. But then he actually doesn't meet Lawrence and Lafayette until he's already in the war. Likewise, he also does not meet and marry Eliza until he is already well into the war. That's, he's well into the war before he even, and it's in fact his time in the war that makes him decide to try to settle down. So it's a little bit, he doesn't even meet her until then. And then likewise, it's also interesting that, for example, there definitely was this interesting triangle with him and Eliza and Angelica, where the two of them together kind of represent a composite of everything that he wants in a woman. But it wasn't a case of Angelica making the call preemptively, as in the musical. She was already married when he came on the scene, and so was therefore unavailable. And so some people think that he might well have proposed to Angelica if she had not already been unavailable. And yet, that triangle was really there. It's just fascinating. And so, like, that change, for example, I really like, because first of all, we can only speculate to a lot of things in there, because we're limited to letters that people wrote, for example, their recollections and what they were willing to share with people, and that's not necessarily always going to tell the whole story, especially when something might be really sensitive. But what I like in the musical is that by having Angelica make the decision initially that she also wanted Alexander, but decided that she would take a step back and let Eliza be with him, or rather to refrain from competing with her sister for him, and it does a number of things in the storytelling of the musical. One is that it gives her as a character more agency, makes her more interesting, gives her thoughts and feelings and something to say, and also it just gives us this additional world building and context, in the sense that we see Hamilton through her eyes, and the description and discussion of, like, well, she's the eldest daughter when there's no male heir in that family, and so it's kind of her responsibility to try to maintain this, the family's status to the extent that they can, that sort of thing. Although it's funny, because in the real history, she literally eloped with this guy, because that guy was not going to be able to get his parental consent from England, because he had run away from debts in England, and so they had to elope because it was going to be complicated. And yet that guy did end up becoming very rich anyway, so it was all kind of weird. Anyway, though, I guess I'm not going to keep rambling so much as to say that I've really been enjoying doing the compare and contrast with this the more studied real historical perspective from the audiobook compared to the version that's in the musical. And I've always been fascinated with the product of in the process of adapting a story from one medium to another, and like what choices you make in that process. So anyway, thumbs up. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow for 5 more minutes.